Ignazio Alboré, Second Democracy. Examples of Political Induction of Value, Chapter 8, Part 3. 1. In both the EU and the US, farmers are heavily subsidized, also because they are supported by the powerful agricultural industry lobby. 50% of the EU budget is earmarked for agricultural subsidies. The Farm Bill 2018 to 2028 in the US has granted $900 million in subsidies. Many American policy experts believe that subsidies hurt farmers and consumers. Chris Edwards says, subsidies inflate land prices, they prevent farmers from innovating and cutting costs. The New York Times has called farm subsidies a mockery and a slush fund. Author Mark Bittman, that the current system is a joke is hardly debatable. Rich farmers get paid even in good years, they get drought relief when there is no drought. Huge subsidies have even been paid to farmers like David Rockefeller. 2. If I subsidize in a systematic, structural and massive way the maritime, fishing, livestock and breeding sectors, which for the most part remain afloat thanks to enormous public aid, I implement upstream a political induction of value, which will make the goods of these sectors much more convenient than competing or alternative goods. Indirectly, therefore, I will determine the value of vegan foods, for example. 3. If governments, through subsidies, regulations, duties, trade diplomatic agreements, choose a main source of energy, they induce having convenient prices only for that source, making it difficult to produce other sources of energy at convenient prices, they will determine upstream, indirectly, the value of other alternative sources. Governments have imposed fossil fuels for 2 centuries ago, then, for about 20 years they have been imposing renewable sources en masse. Now, from 2025, Donald Trump will again impose fossil fuels on everyone or almost everyone. 4. On April 2, 2025, Donald Trump imposed very heavy tariffs on 60 countries. 5. The USA spends $38 billion a year on subsidies to the meat and dairy industry. A $5 Big Mac, without subsidies, would cost $13. 6. In the US, the price of gasoline is much lower than elsewhere, due to much lighter taxes. During the 2021 to 2022 inflation crisis, while in the US the pump price was around $4.61, in the UK it was double, $8.50 per gallon. Crude oil had the same wholesale price in every country, as it was traded on the global market. By playing with taxes and subsidies, each country generates a completely different value of goods. 7. During the COVID emergency, the closure of restaurants and the obligation to stay at home has caused the demand for food delivery to skyrocket all over the world. The value of delivery goods has increased due to a sudden change in the preferences of individuals, from traditional catering to delivery, but a change induced by the anti-COVID public regulation which has prohibited the opening of restaurants and leaving the house. Furthermore, the value of delivery has not increased due to the shortage of delivery goods. The value of the latter is determined in relation to the value of the respective alternative goods, i.e. the food consumed in restaurants. 8. The recovery plan launched by the EU in 2021 is a sort of 5-year plan of $723.8 billion that provides for each EU country huge non-repayable grants and financing, a gigantic example of how states and supranational institutions determine the value of goods, a plan of reforms, including those on competition and the environment. The contradiction is evident. 1. To create competition, government spending is needed only for some. 2. To move to a green economy, a centralized supranational institution, the EU, is needed that directs subsidies towards an alternative state value, that is, the environmental one. 9. After the huge mountain of government spending and government regulation implemented by states due to a. Subprime crisis 2008 to 2009, b. Transition to green economy, c. COVID-19 pandemic, d. War in Ukraine and consequent increase in gas prices, in February 2025 the European Union launched the huge government spending plan of about €800 billion for the rearmament of EU countries. At the same time, states are starting to implement a transition and reconversion from automotive industries to weapons-producing industries. 10. TikTok is one of the largest global entertainment and information platforms, 1 billion users, which, like all Chinese companies, responds to the Chinese state. It is in the hands of a non-democratic system and suffers heavy interference from the Chinese Communist Party. Therefore, the state value that the company incorporates is already very high. In 2024, The US House of Representatives ordered TikTok to sell its platform to an American company within 6 months under penalty of its definitive closure in America. Therefore, to the politically induced value of the Chinese government is added the politically induced value of the US government. 11. On March 13, 2024, the European Parliament approved the Artificial Intelligence Act. The regulation bans certain AI applications. Thus, before the AI technological revolution even begins, state values are already deciding value, upstream before preferences and shortage can determine value. 12. The Italian government has banned the production and trade in Italy of synthetic meat and other foods obtained in laboratories. In this way, government regulation has directly decided the entire value of synthetic meat and other synthetic foods and indirectly the value of their alternative goods, namely farmed meat and foods of animal origin. 13. Amazon has become a giant thanks to subsidies and special favors from the government. The giant wields enormous influence over federal, state, and local governments. Its employees have attempted to organize a union, but the company has tried to defeat them by co-opting government powers. From the beginning, Amazon has used public money and government favors in the form of legal loopholes that have allowed it to crush competitors and abuse workers. It gets local tax breaks in exchange for warehouse locations and special prices on shipments through the US Postal Service. 14. Over the past 15 years, Airbnb rentals, i.e. property rental contracts with a maximum duration of 30 days, have become very widespread throughout the world. The phenomenon has become so widespread that, in recent years, many of the world's tourist capitals, Singapore, New York, Barcelona, Berlin, Tokyo, Montreal, Lisbon, Paris, Florence, etc., have adopted very restrictive measures to limit or effectively make illegal short-term rentals, citing as justification the disappearance of free apartments in the city, unfair competition against hotels, and the shift of tourist spending to other destinations. 15. When electricity, gas, telephones, airplanes, generic drugs, parapharmacies, television, post offices, fuels, and the labor market were deregulated, consumers turned to alternative goods and producers, and their value changed, not because the utility preferences of those consumers changed or their perception of the shortage of the good changed, but simply because governments created the conditions so that there was the possibility of preferring other goods. 16. A significant increase in interest rates indirectly determines the value of home mortgages, loans, and investments.